The story begins with our hero Dante introducing himself to us. He believes that he is the smartest man alive in the world, although that claim might be up for debate. He then decides to take us back to the beginning, which in this case is the year 4241 BC. We see a couple of cavemen munching on some meat by the fire, but to their surprise, a race car approaches them. It's hard to imagine something as advanced as this in the ancient era, but then the car makes an excessive entrance, much to the cavemen's dismay. A blonde man in shades, revealed to be Dante's ancestor, pops out of the car and, strangely enough, asks for a latte, which clearly doesn't make any kind of sense. The cavemen aren't too pleased by Dante's ancestor, so they angrily charge at him while he tries to pose like a player. That's when our hero reveals that this was just a mere exaggeration and isn't a true story. In a more realistic flashback, we're taken to 1944 when Dante was born, because that's his first ever memory. He mentions that he immediately started to study his surroundings the moment he popped out of his mom's womb, and he immediately surprises everyone in the room when he starts saying his own name on the very first day. This isn't normal human behavior, as rightly pointed out by the doctors, but Dante turns out to be a freak of nature and is already processing his brain at an elevated speed. 2 years later, Dante becomes a boy genius who prefers books to toys. His parents aren't exactly thrilled to see their son grow out of his baby phase so quickly, but they still entertain his requests. At the age of 5, Dante is gifted a TV set, and he is overjoyed to witness such an impressive piece of technology. Dante's mom is worried that her son might get carried away by the movies being shown, but his dad is confident that there isn't anything to learn from silly movies. Dante overhears this and agrees that the movie he's watching is senseless, but he still manages to learn something from it. Now, Dante asks his mom to get him a lab set, and she surprisingly agrees to his request, although they'll both need approval from his dad first. Dante gets his lab set and immediately gets to work on studying genetics and DNA. He even goes a step further and creates a chemical that can alter the genetic build of animals. Dante's first test subject is a typical lab mouse, and as expected, he succeeds in turning into a monster. The idea is to create a human and animal hybrid, but the mouse quickly dies because Dante has used too much of the human gene. Our hero doesn't lose hope and maintains that science is not an easy road to take. He continues with his experiments, and it's fairly easy for him to get his hands on certain chemicals owing to the fact that his dad is a doctor. He fails 127 times, but his next experiment seemingly does the trick. Dante shows his parents the mouse and human hybrid, but they are horrified to see the creature, which looks even scarier than Frankenstein's monster. The hybrid creature undergoes an existential crisis, so the family decides to go for a drive, but it turns out to be a trick to get Dante admitted into a school for mad scientists. Dante's mom reluctantly drops her son off at the school, but we quickly learn that it's actually a madhouse for mentally ill people. Despite knowing what he's getting into, Dante happily ventures into this new world because he's excited to learn new things. Our hero visits a patient at the madhouse, who understandably gets scared to see such a young boy trying to diagnose him. That's the cue for Dr. Penance to make an entrance. He says he's going to be examining Dante's mind with a stern look on his face, but our hero is more than happy to be studied. He even tells Penance that he loves to learn so much that he doesn't mind doing this till the very day he dies. This is, of course, a bit of a shocker for the doctor, as he doesn't expect to hear such an answer. Now, Penance explains to Dante that the reason he's been brought here for examination is because he's unreasonably intelligent to the point where he might have become insane. This stems from the fact the genius boy doesn't really consider the feelings of other living beings, especially when it comes to his own learning. Penance even mentions the mouse experiment that Dante had conducted, but our hero asks him if he was impressed by the results. The doctor loses his patience and lashes out at Dante by saying he doesn't have the right to play God. However, the genius boy doesn't like the fact that he needs to be fixed in order to achieve a herd mentality, just like the other average people of his world. However, Penance maintains that he's going to turn Dante into an outstanding citizen, and seemingly threatens his patient under the guise of helping him. Dante doesn't care for such an extremist attitude, so he immediately strikes his doctor to break free from his grasp. However, the trauma and pressure of this experience triggers Dante, and he starts performing extreme calculations in his head. Penance finds himself in a rather open space, and he locates his victim on the floor, trying to figure out where he's arrived. All the equations that Dante is shouting out make no sense to Penance, and he tries to sway him to come back to him. However, Dante isn't going to make the same mistake twice, so he continues with his equations and suddenly merges with a dark energy. The doctor is amazed to see this, but then Dante summons shadow tentacles from his body and attacks Penance with them. It turns out that Penance has infiltrated Dante's mind, and the genius boy has identified this, which is why he's currently attacking him. Dante wants to know how such an achievement is possible, because he doesn't know of any scientific technique or equation that can allow something like this. Our hero turns over to the dark side and threatens to kill the doctor if he doesn't reveal how he was able to enter his mind. Penance tries to ask for mercy, but it's of no use as Dante's shadow tentacles close in on him. Suddenly, there's a disruption, and it causes both Penance and Dante to get separated from each other, both mentally and physically. There's a brief moment of confusion, as nobody seems to know who caused the interruption. However, Penance comes to his senses and accuses Dante of being the culprit, while also commenting that this is something he shouldn't have been able to do. Instead of carrying on with the seemingly fraudulent therapy, Penance decides this isn't the time to bite more than he can chew, so he leaves Dante alone and tells him he can go. The doctor informs our hero's mom that she should bring him in next week, because it's going to take more than a single session to break down Dante. This is a cause of concern for Dante's mom, and she goes to check up on her son, but he tells her he's fine as of now. However, that isn't the case, because our hero is clearly bamboozled by what he saw from Penance. He tries to reason that there must be a scientific explanation behind Penance entering his mind, because this is almost like it's magic. Hoping to find an answer to all his burning questions, Dante quickly rushes to the library and goes through all the books he can find. Despite his efforts, our hero isn't able to find a single thing pointing out to how Penance was able to use mind control powers. However, when all hope seems lost, the genius boy spots some information in a book on his side. Dante is amazed by what he sees and figures this can be the only explanation behind his tragic experience. He needs to do some tests first, so he gets to work and pulls out some string from his own bed. Next up is water, so Dante gathers some of it by asking one of the nurses. It doesn't just end there, as our hero creates an odd cup concoction and even puts a bit of food inside it after he's done with his dinner. Now, he attaches the string to his cup and throws it out of the window into the garden outside. Dante uses this trap to capture another mouse and pulls it up so that he can use it for a different kind of experiment. Our hero shouts out for help, mentioning the presence of a mouse in his room. A guard quickly rushes to his aid and opens the locked door with his key. Dante uses the mouse distraction to keep the guard occupied while he takes the key and locks him inside with the nurse. He then goes to the cafeteria where he finds a kitchen knife and wields it as if he's a serial killer. An intense sequence follows as Dante wraps up the knife with some cloth and lights it on fire, after which he leaves the stove on to create maximum damage. As expected, the cafeteria starts to burn, and the heat slowly spreads throughout the building. It doesn't take long for an explosion to occur, and it leads to all kinds of chaos. While the others try to survive this horrible experience, Dante makes his way into the library using the same key. Meanwhile, Penance reaches the madhouse and is shocked to see it on fire. A nurse calls out to Dante hoping to find him safe and sound, but Penance already knows that he's the culprit rather than the victim of this mess. Our hero manages to find Penance's file and decides it's time to make haste, but he hears the mad doctor calling out to him while entering the madhouse. Penance is shown to have a purple aura around him, thus confirming that he is no normal human. Dante doesn't have the time or the skills to defeat him, so he tries to run away from Penance. However, the mad doctor states that there's nowhere to run in the middle of this fiery mess. Regardless, the genius boy jumps over some flames and burns his clothes in the process. However, Penance isn't going to let him off so easily, and he triggers a pillar to fall onto Dante. Our hero is confused as to how Penance is able to pull something like this off, but tensions rise as the pillar seemingly strikes him in the middle of all the fire. That's the end of Volume 1. Like, share, and subscribe if you want more manga explained videos. See you later.